been shooting for Conclave for I think 4 years, and I'm on the Burning Man documentation team as well, and I think we're all probably self-taught and sort of stumbled into this kind of thing, and found fire photography pretty darn amazing. And after a lot of trial and error, have come up with our own learning path and techniques. And I'm sure all you guys know stuff that I don't as well. And so I can just kind of advise about what I do and how I do it. And I'm in Seattle.
I'm Grant. If anybody doesn't know me, I've been doing this for over 10 years. Still learning. Went to my first Burning Man in 2013 after being asked to be a documentarian for Burn Academy for Scorch in like June. So I really know about fast preparation. And then in the last 4 years, been a documentarian for Burning Man. I think one of the things that I also do is I'm a portrait artist as well, and I think that informs a lot of what I do. So it'd be interesting to talk about some of those things as well. And I'm in beautiful downtown Burbank, California, where it's hot as whatever outside.
I'm Kevin Levijou. I've been taking photographs since I was 12. My dad was a photographer, so I grew up in a dark room.
Awesome.
And been shooting for a long time. Started shooting or going to Burning Man in 2008, 2009. Used to live in Reno, so it was really easy. Been shooting fire for about same as Grant, about 10 years, and shooting for Conclave for the last 4. So excited to be here, and we'll kind of go over the questions. That we had a lot of people saying they were coming, and only a few of us are here, so that's kind of cool because if you guys have specific questions, if somebody in the group, if Hank answers a question and you want to know a little bit more, feel free to ask more and we'll dig into those things because it's kind of cool. None of us here are trying to hide any secrets. We'll tell you what we know, and we'll see if we can figure this out together. So kind of fun that it's a small group because we can get a little more in depth for those people that are asking. Or if you
have a question afterwards, I mean, Phil, I'll speak for everybody else. Why not? Feel free to just contact us. This doesn't necessarily end here. It's kind of like Burning Man. It goes on forever. You get out of this thing and you think, oh, I should have asked that question. Just send us an email or Facebook or Instagram or whatever. Happy to answer.
Cool. I think the number one question that was asked kind of pre this was how do you get more texture in the flame and still have a person that you can see. So we were talking about this a little bit ahead of time when we were trying to pre-plan this, and I think each of us has a slightly different technique. So Hank, you want to kind of start with yours, or Grant, either one? I don't care.
I'm probably the worst at it, so I'll start. When I shoot fire, I'm more interested in the person than the flame, and so I've always kind of blown out my highlights because I know a common technique is to underexpose and then bring it out later, and that's something I need to do more. But because I love the photos that have all that wonderful texture, so that's I don't really do a great job at that. I have some techniques for recovering the gray spots. When you blow out the flame, often you'll find little gray edges to the flame when in Lightroom, and so I'll brush in some white balance in yellow to kind of cover that, and I'll do a lot of brushing in Lightroom later to cover a lot of little things like that too. That's kind of what I do.
Grant?
Sure. For me, it's about putting the flame part at one end of the histogram and getting used to how much I can fix that in post and bringing it out in either Lightroom or Photoshop to lighten the performer. The other thing that helps, and this is kind of informed by doing a lot of street photography, so go out and do street photography. It really improves your timing. Getting to know the performer, even if it's for 5 minutes, just watch them spin. They will do patterns. They will do patterns. They will do patterns. The flame will come by and light them nicely. That way you can get far more exposure on the flame, on the face and the rest of the performer, and not have to have a blown out highlight. And that's kind of one of the things I do. But yeah, Lightroom and Photoshop have got really, really good. Noise performance on cameras has got really, really good. So it's not nearly so hard these days as it used to be. Kevin.
And then my techniques are some of the same and some different. Because that was always my focus. I went to the flame first and the performer second. So with me, the first thing I do is I remember something that was taught to me called the white duck theory. Whereas if you take a picture, I used to work with a lot of nature photographers, and if you take a picture of a bird that has white feathers, you have to underexpose it just slightly, because most of our cameras can go below the register, but once you hit that white and blur out, you're gone.
Yeah.
So you pick the exposure that will hit, just start to white out your flame, and then go with that from there. And it changes by every tool, because every single tool, if you're photographing a fire breather, there's a lot more light there, and there's a lot, it's going to blow out faster than if you're working with somebody with a fire fan or the worst of the mouth torches, because that's such a little flame. So then my other technique that I use is add light. And you can add light a lot of ways. You can add light by shooting earlier in the evening, where you're shooting as it's getting dark, and just then you can expose it down to the flame because you know you're going to get some of that. Or you can add light through strobes, or nowadays I use almost always constant light, because the LED lighting that's out there is pretty cool. And it's not like it used to be where you needed a strobe because you couldn't use a constant light because it was so hot. With LED lighting now, you can pull off a lot more stuff. This is what I use. It's an old, bought it on Amazon for $40. It's a work light that's battery operated, put a yellow filter on it, and that works to add a lot of light when you're dealing with a low front flame. Comma, question mark, that's only when you are able to set up the shot. If you're shooting in a performance, you're screwed. You can't do that. You're hoping there's stage lighting or something. So,
and just to add on to that, know your camera really, really well. Get to know your camera, and get to know what you can change fast and what you can't change fast. I have a couple. Figure out if your camera has presets. Use them. I have a preset for general tools, and I have a preset for fire breathers. And with a turn of a dial, I can be 90% of the way there on my kind of standard settings, and then kind of adjust my exposure.
That's a good idea.
Quickly. Yeah. Use
that works really well on Canon gear. Nikon doesn't have that shit. So
yeah.
I shoot Nikon, so I'm screwed.
Yeah.
So what I do with Nikon is I carry more than one camera if I'm in those situations.
Yeah.
I'll carry up to 3, like burn night, I carry 3 cameras.
Yeah.
And they're all with different lenses, and they're all with different settings. So I can just pick up a camera. If somebody's going to breathe fire, I've got a fire breathing setting. So what other questions did you guys, Hank, or where'd Hank go? Did Hank disappear on us?
Hank's there. Hank's there.
There you are. What other questions we're asking in the pre-thing that we can answer? Hank, you remember any of them?
I'm just looking at the spreadsheet, the registration spreadsheet. Let's see, what's a good one? How to photograph fire in motion. I suppose that means like how fast, if the flame is moving quickly or not. I think we all probably shoot on burst mode all the time for fire.
Yeah.
So you know, I will you know, I don't go for trying to get a long exposure. I try for the short exposure as I can, because I'm trying to capture. It's very dark, and so I typically am shooting with the aperture wide open. So because I'm trying to get the person, and because I don't want too much noise, so I'm trying to keep my ISO down as much as I can, based on what tool they're using. Um, so I'm not really trying to get a long, you know, exposure of flame with a flash or something like that. I'm trying to freeze them on. I typically will. So my typical shooting settings are probably like, I'll start out at like ISO 400, and the, you know, I typically shoot with a 70 to 200 millimeter Canon lens, and I'll shoot you know, wide open, but I'll feel paranoid about that, and I'll pull it back to like f4 or 5.6, and because I don't want to miss the shot in focusing, and then I'll typically I want to shoot it at, you know, faster than 160th of a second, because I want to freeze it. I want to not blur the person. So I'm trying. It's like I'm trying to struggle at that edge of like, how can I not get it blurry but get enough light? And so yeah, you watch the person, and if they're doing a movement or a repeated thing, you know, they're pausing. Some people hold pretty still when they're doing fire performance, and others really move. So you kind of have to work with that, as you know, as fast as you can.
So a couple of tips on that is, number one, go onto Flickr. I know it's an old website nobody uses anymore, but go onto Flickr and look at fire pictures, because in Flickr will tell you the settings they used.
Yeah.
Right.
And you can go see the settings they used. And if it wasn't fast enough, there's an app called Perfect Exposure, and you can type in the settings and then change the shutter speed, and it creates the triangle, the photographic triangle that will tell you, okay, if you're going to be at this shutter speed, then you need to have this setting or this setting. So you can't do it on the playa, but you can if you're doing it in your backyard, because quite frankly, on the playa, everything's screwed up, and you're going to have to know this before you get there. But those are two tips. Number one, if you want to find out the setting on how somebody shot something, go to Flickr, figure it out, or ask one of us. Any of our pictures that you see on, I mean, all of us are on Instagram or Facebook or whatever. You can just text us and say, hey, I saw you on video. What were your settings on this? We don't care.
Yeah, I used to pour over Flickr and look at the EXIF for so many photos. I loved when it was the default to reveal that information on Flickr. Yeah. And you can look up lenses and see, what is this particular lens? So good.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
So, yeah, so for me, just on my base settings for sort of regular fire tools, I'm at about an ISO 1600, f 2.8, and then depending on the tool, I think my defaults now are at 3/20th of a second. But then depending on the tool, I'll work the shutter up and down. Breathers are like 800th of a second, 5.6, and 400 ISO. But if somebody comes in and says, I'm a really fast spinner, or I'm at a jam and somebody is a fast spinner, the thing that helps you is knowing, it's not a triangle, but knowing your exposure triangle and knowing your f-stops. And so if I know that I'm going to need to really freeze motion and go up to 640 or 800, all right, I'm going to stop different. I'm already at my widest on the lens. All right, can I just really quickly change my ISO up a stop to compensate?
Yeah, I'm constantly doing that.
Yeah, we all are. I mean, that it's something that you need to I mean, Grant brought this up earlier. Practice. You don't have to practice on an actual performer. Take a wick on a string and spin it back and forth on your backyard and just take pictures of it, and you'll figure it out. But no, absolutely, that's great advice, Grant.
Yeah, and it's also about knowing what those settings do for different types of tools and different looks that you want, because you can capture motion in a bunch of different ways. You can capture it by freezing it, or you can capture it by making it more flowy. Think about what you want, whether you want to slow the action down. All right, now you can close down your f-stop, or you can go slower on ISO, so you can get a longer shutter speed, so you get more of a flow, or you really want to freeze it. And this goes to the earlier question of making it more crispy. Faster shutter speed will make it more crispy. Okay.
One of the things that that I've kind of been playing with is temperature. You know, I realize that it's really an art of like how orange and how, you know, warm you want your pictures to be. But do any of you guys set your camera with temperature, or do you just go auto? Or
No, I shoot on manual. I mean, since I'm shooting raw, I don't mess with the white balance on the camera.
Okay, well,
all later.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, same here. I'm all my gear is set up for just auto white balance, so it's kind of sort of right on the back of the camera, so you know I know I've got something, but everything is raw.
Yeah.
So I can tweak it later, and then judicious use of adjustment brushes in Lightroom can bring faces back out of being Munchkin land.
Yeah,
Right.
and I'm a little different because I found in Lightroom I always dropped it down to about 42 or 4600. So I shoot my camera. I'm still shooting raw, but I am shooting in the 42 to 4600 range because that's my style. I like it a little colder, and it brings out a little different flame. So, you know, a different way to look at it would be, yeah, I can always adjust it, but the less shit I have to do in Lightroom, the better.
Yeah. That's exactly. It was a thing that I was doing on every single picture, and I've started to think, well, maybe I should just do it in the camera. And
are you in Lightroom?
I haven't played around with Lightroom yet. I've been using Capture One, and then just the last set I did, I used an iPad Pro app called Pixelmator, and that was really great. But yeah, I haven't really played around with Lightroom much. The Capture One does a lot though.
Yeah, and I think Capture One has import settings that you can set presets for.
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
Figure out, and this is about getting close. It's not about getting it perfect on import, because everything will be different.
Yeah.
But I use Lightroom, so I have a default fire import.
Okay.
That will do some basic adjustments of some clarity. It'll play with the temperature a little bit and massage some things. So I'm not adjusting as far, so that when I do my cull, even just from that import, I've got a better idea of what the image is going to look like.
Right.
Yeah. Presets are your friend.
Yeah, I use Lightroom also, and I have one preset that is, because I underexpose almost every picture, I have one preset that just brings all that out. So when I'm doing my, 5,000 pictures down to 500 pictures, I can throw that across the board on everything and see what's there and what's not. If I underexposed it too much, then I can always take the preset off later, but it gives me a chance to look at that in Lightroom.
And also later on, when I have a photo I want to work on, I will also play around with white balance just to see what it looks like in different situations. Like if I'll kind of dwell on a shot that I think has potential, but maybe I'm not satisfied with it yet, and I'll like drop it down to be super cold, so the person looks like they're under like white light instead of orange, and sometimes that can make a really interesting look to it, instead of it always being the super orange of fire. And sometimes that works on some shots and sometimes it doesn't. And then if I have a particular shot that maybe it's the exposure is really terrible and it's really overexposed, or some other problem with it where I just can't get the color right, I'll switch to black and white just to find out what it looks like, and sometimes it really works.
Yeah.
Like a black and white fire photo, if it's the right thing to do, fantastic.
Yeah, definitely when you've got a good picture of their face as well. And there are some photos that I've made that they're good color photos. They look epic in black and white.
Right.
Yeah.
And, you know, play with that and get to sort of know it, and, you know, maybe throw a few into black and white and just see what you get, particularly ones that are a little bit more moody, a little bit more emotion.
Right.
You just have a little bit more tug on the black and white.
Yeah, I had this one photo of this one woman at a performance here in Seattle, and she was wearing this outfit that was black and white stripes, and so it was easy to do a high contrast photo of her, and that's what, you know, when all the blacks were blacker and all the whites were whiter, it just popped in this really, really great way.
Yep. No, that absolutely, those are great. And Hank, I've seen some of his black and whites that make you just stop in your tracks. I mean, I don't do as well at that, but these two guys have some incredible stuff on it.
We have other questions.
Are there other questions?
All right, I think there's a couple around gear that were in the list, and just to give folks a little bit of an idea, I started doing this with a Canon 40D, which was a long time ago, and it had really awful noise performance and scorched on using it. You can do this pretty much with any camera, and particularly modern cameras. So James, I think you had a question about APS-C.
Yep. Oh yeah, that's what I'm using.
Yeah, does it have a lens? Does it have a sensor? Can you turn the button?
Yeah.
And it's good.
You can use it.
Yeah, I've been taking lots of pictures. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean there are some things, and this is like general gear questions of like, you know, would a more expensive camera make me a better photographer? No, it doesn't. Choose a camera that's good at what you want to do. You know, I choose my gear because there are a variety of things I photograph. Like I do sports and roller derby and that sort of stuff. If you're doing slower things and more portrait things, most cameras will be able to do it. The sensor size doesn't really matter that much. I mean, it changes your depth of field and those types of things, but in terms of the images, no, you should be able to get good images with those.
Yeah, in fact, I will typically go to a shoot with the Canon in the 70 to 200, but also a Canon 7D with a wide lens, like a 10 to 24 on a Canon 7D. Depends on how far away from the person you are, and how if you're trying to get a group shot, you're not going to get that with a long lens. So maybe I want that group shot, and for that, you know, an APS-C size sensor is just fine. You know, it's great.
Yeah.
So I'll switch between the two depending on where I am and what I want and what I'm seeing, and hopefully get something with that.
Yeah, I started shooting with a crop sensor. My Nikon D90 is sitting behind me, and I actually took one of my best pictures last year at Burning Man with that camera. So, and it really is more about the technique and the other things than the camera. Having said that, a couple of things to think about is, do you want, if you're taking this to Burning Man, do you want a zoom lens or do you want a prime lens? I used to shoot all with zoom out there, and after spending a lot of money cleaning my lenses afterwards, I went to pretty much prime.
You don't bring all your camera gear you don't bring everything?
What was that, Hank?
You don't bring all your camera gear to Burning Man? Just bring it all.
Yeah, I kind of do.
I bring a lot. But when I walk into the Great Circle, I'll have two prime lenses and one zoom lens, and the zoom lens is on my crop sensor because it's a cheaper lens. But I'll shoot with like I have an 85 here that's 85 1.8, and I took a 35 1.4 lens on my two cameras. So it really, if I'm in an environment that's not Burning Man, where I don't give a shit about getting dust on my stuff, I will carry a zoom lens. I will shoot with the 70 to 200 or the 24 to 70 lens because it gives me a lot more options. But if you're in that environment, I like prime lenses just because I don't want to have to deal with the crap later.
And then, welcome to, you get 3 photographers and you get 8 opinions. I primarily use my zooms at Burning Man because I want the flexibility and I don't want to be changing all the time. And weather sealing on the cameras. My 70 to 200 has gone to every single Burning Man I have been to and is still going strong. The only reason my 24 to 70 died is because I went over to some wastelandy kind of camp and went and made some images of some people over there, and I bashed it into a piece of the structure, and it kind of half snapped. Still made it through burn night, but again, it's know your gear and know what you want out of it.
Right.
Absolutely. And then Hank's the king of cameras. He usually walks out there with what, 8 cameras when you go to Burning Man?
Mm-hmm.
When I go, no, way more than that. I've shot a lot of film and instant and pinhole and infrared and all kinds of techniques. So my record was 24 that I brought one year. Wow. I didn't use 2 of those. I used all of it. I used like 22 of them. But yeah, when I walk in the Great Circle, I'm typically have just the 2, like the 7D for the wide and the 70 for the everything else, which I use more. But yeah, Scorch is asking in the chat, if you have no camera equipment except for your phone, is there a way of changing settings? Yeah, I think so. If you have like an iPhone, you can actually adjust exposure by tapping on the screen and doing a little raise up and down thing with the default app. That would work great if the person's probably standing rather still and they are and the exposure is kind of even, like if the flame effect is happening kind of evenly. Also on Android and on iPhones, you can use a burst mode there too. So if you hold down the shutter button, it'll do a burst mode, and it should be putting out individual JPEGs. So that's really handy for catching action. And so maybe if the lighting situation is changing moment by moment, you could just burst mode on your phone and then choose later.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there are a variety of apps for both Android and iPhone that will let you control the various settings that you don't get in the native camera.
Right.
The one thing I would say about that and shooting with an iPhone or even shooting with a mirrorless looking through the back is you've got to be really, really careful about being solid because your arms will do this all the time. The nice part about having a through a viewfinder camera is you basically form a tripod with you. And the camera is locked against you, so as long as you stay steady, it's steady.
Right. Some people will hold their arms against themselves, you know, to steady it. Yeah.
That'll get you the best image with the least amount of movement in the phone itself.
Yeah.
Right.
Or in the mirrorless that you're looking through the screen on the back too.
The biggest downfall with iPhones right now is, at least as far as I know, we still can't get RAW out of them. And so your editing later is going to be limited. But maybe that's changed because, quite frankly, I don't shoot a lot with iPhones or with smartphones. But if you can find even a cheap camera that'll allow you to shoot RAW, that's going to be better than most, because as we talked about, a lot of this is done post. We may shoot on the field, but shooting RAW gives us a lot more options when we get to editing.
And there are great sources for used gear that has a limited warranty, like the website KEH is fantastic. They're an amazing website, and they guarantee their gear up to like 90 days. Plenty of time to check it out. It's better than buying off of Craigslist or eBay. And you can buy a lot of perfectly great gear for very good prices from them. And Adorama and B&H Photo also have used sections.
Yeah.
So you buy it 30 days before Burning Man, use it, and then forget it. I didn't say that.
Don't ever rent gear because you'll have a sad when you try and return it, and you don't get your deposit back.
Right.
I bought my main cam used from B&H, but circling back to the phone thing that Scorch was talking about, it goes back to what we were talking about before, but adding light to the situation that the performer's in. If you can, if you have control over where they are, where they're positioned, bring them to an area where there's more light, the camera will do better in more light. So with your phone, you just got to add light as much as possible to get a better image out of a phone.
Yeah. Well, I mean, just to give you an idea, my studio, when I do fire in studio with strobes, I'm at ISO 100, 160th of a second, f8. And I can move from there. So that's plenty of latitude as long as you pump in enough light. So to Stuart's point, if you can get, I can't really show it to you because it's nailed on the top of my monitor.
Go ahead.
But just the little LED thing, it'll pump in a bunch of light for you.
Yeah. Scorch, you were going to ask something?
Yeah, so my biggest question is, I mean, when I see the difference for me in fire photography is when the fire gets really blown out. So you see photos where the fire is just this kind of white, yellow blur. And then you see photos where the fire is crisp and defined. How do you raise the bar and go from that blown out blur to actually seeing the licks of the flames in the fire? And I apologize if you explained that already and I missed it.
We did, but let's go over it again. So
more people in here, so that's fine.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a choice of the photographer whether they want to go white or whether they want to go, to the flame. And the reason is if you go white, you can get a lot more detail in your picture of the performer themselves. So if I blow out a flame, I'm going to capture a lot more detail of that performer. If I go to the flame and expose for that, that's just basically, we've talked about some settings, but the one I always start with is what Grant was talking about with your settings of, almost like fire breathing settings, which are, ISO 400, shutter speed of 800 and 4.5, somewhere in there. And then start cranking it back until I start seeing white. So I'll chimp, what they call chimp on a camera. I'll look at the back and see if there's any white and dial back my exposures until I get to the point where I just see white. Then I have a picture with the flame. When you look at the back of the picture, if you look at the back of the camera and you're not planning for it, you will go, oh crap, I can't see anything but the flame and maybe a little outline of the person. That's when you have to know your software afterwards to come back in and bring it out in edit. So you if you want that flame, then you come back into Lightroom and expose. And I will give you a trick there. If you want really, really crispy flames, you take it all the way in Lightroom, take it all the way up in clarity. And it may not be crispy enough for you. So that at that point you export it out as if it was going to Photoshop and then re-imported it again. And then you can take the clarity right back up again, because now you're doubling the clarity that Lightroom will allow you. So you don't even need something like Photoshop. You can double the crispiness of your flame by playing with that. Realizing you're going to make that person look like shit at that point, so you almost have to go back into Photoshop and layer it and bring that person back out. But that's the way to get really crispy flames, is to expose to the flame and then just tweak the hell out of it in Lightroom.
Yeah, and you have to expect to ride with the tool. Like my default is 3/20th of a second, but if somebody comes in with a massive dragon, you better believe that the shutter is just going straight to 640 or 800. And I'm going to start from there when they've got a brand new flame and then ride it with them. And part of this is experience as well. And I can talk for definitely the three of us. We've taken a lot of really awful photos.
Most
really, you guys get, it's amazing. You guys get to see the ones that we're happy with. You don't get to see the ones that are really, really, really bad.
Right.
And the way you get better is by taking a lot of crappy photos.
So something you were mentioning there is really, really true that I haven't thought about in a little while, is how the lighting really changes during one person's performance, because when they first light up, they've got so much fuel that you're going to be exposing, a certain level. And then within, a minute or so, you're just watching the light level drop and drop and drop as you're shooting them. And it gets to a point for me where they've lost half their light or 3/4 of the light. I just stop, because it's like, if I were to keep going, I'd be getting longer and longer exposures or jacking up the ISO, so there's more and more noise. And it's like, I love, it's great to have all that light in the beginning, but you have to follow that exposure as they're burning off that fuel.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That is actually one of the benefits of adding light. I mean, if you back to this piece of crap, if you add that light next to the person, I don't have to change my exposure as much, because I'm exposing for the flame, but I know that the person will continue to have light on them. So you can add this kind of light. You can do it at dusk. You can put them under a street light if you're out in something, or put them in front of a street light so the light's hitting them. But then I don't have to adjust my settings as much. If I am out and shooting, if you notice, if you go to we'll give a shameless plug, but if you go to fireconclave.org, you'll see all our burn night pictures, and almost all of us shoot white out flame on burn night because we're trying to capture that person. We're not as focused on the flame because we can't add light and we can't adjust the other light. So we're going to just have to rely on that flame. And so on those specific flames, you're going to see a lot of them be white. And that's a choice we all make because we know we can't play the other tricks.
Yeah. And if it's somebody that you know, or if you're at a fire jam and you've got a poi spinner, okay, that poi spinner is going to come back 2 or 3 times. And they're going to do the same thing 2 or 3 times. If it's a new spinner, just watch them and watch what they do and improve your timing, because there's like a 1/4 of a second between the time that you actually go off in here and then this thing works and then it gets through the camera. So you're actually deciding to make the exposure when the poi is actually coming up, so that when the shutter opens, the poi's right here.
Right.
And again, that's taking a lot of garbage photos, going back and review them. Never throw anything away on the camera unless you're really, really short.
It's also a waste of time.
Yeah.
Don't chimp while you're, don't edit, don't throw away photos as you're shooting.
Yeah.
And that's also true if like a performer's spinning around in circles. It's like you don't really want to picture the back of their head. So it's like, as they're turning around towards you, take the pictures and then stop taking pictures,
Yeah.
Because we're running a little low on time. Well, no, we're not. Who cares? But a couple of questions that we got or I've had before, and something I actually learned from Hank many years ago out there on the playa, is how do you focus in the dark? Because so many of our cameras, so many times you take pictures and you think, oh, that's epic. And then you look at it in editing, and you're so out of focus. You shot something that's 2 miles away. So how do you focus in the dark? Hank, you want to kind of talk it through the way you talked me through it?
I don't remember what I said, but I can guess.
Well, back button was the first thing you taught me.
Yeah.
Yeah, it started with a lot of party photography I did, where I would go to parties and it would be really too dark for the autofocus to work at all. And so I'd shooting with a flash. And so I'd just literally walk over to a trash can and take a picture about as far away as the people who I expected to take pictures of that night. And I focus, and then I would off in the old days before I learned about back button, I would shift the lens from autofocus lens to manual focus and just leave and just don't even touch it. And but now a lot of cameras by default, when you take a picture, if you have to press the button, it'll focus, and then you finish pushing it, and it takes a picture. And so if you back button, you focus once, and then you can just shutter away on burst mode to your heart's content, and it will not be trying to refocus again. So if the person is staying the same distance away, you don't need to focus on them again. So you just focus the one time and make sure you stay the same distance.
Yeah, I'm I do back button focus, and it's basically turning, yeah, like Hank said, when you normally do a shutter, it does an autofocus automatically. Go read your manual, learn how to turn that off and back button it. A lot of these techniques come from sports photographers. Guess what you're photographing? You're photographing a lot of really fast moving things in really, really crappy light. Sports photographers do that every day. If there's a sports photographer doing a talk somewhere near you that's, you know, inexpensive or free, go and listen to them. Go on YouTube, learn what they do, because a lot of those techniques are applicable. Back button allows me to put focus exactly where I want it. I can use the most sensitive focus point of the camera, which is generally the center one.
Yeah.
Okay, my composition may not be great, but that's why I've got a bunch of pixels and I can crop it. It's okay.
I crop almost everything.
But what back button does is it means I can set the focus and then move away. So as I'm watching the performer, and some performers move a lot and that makes it harder, but if somebody's just spinning poi and they're kind of steady, when the poi goes past them, you can focus on that. And now you've got focus. You take your thumb off the button, your camera's not going to refocus until you hit that back button again.
So the one trick I have about that is know your aperture. So if you know how far away you are from the person and you are shooting at a 1.4 wide open lens and you're 4 feet away from them, the back, you know, you got this much exposure range. So really understand this works really well if you're shooting somebody at a distance. If you're shooting somebody close, you almost have to back button focus on every shot. So, but that's the same with portrait photography or any other photography. You know, if you have a very shallow depth of field based on the lens and the gear you're using, know it. It doesn't, I mean, it's okay if that's what you want to shoot. Just know what you're doing and know what you have, you know, think in your mind, okay, I've got a 6-inch depth of field. I got to nail that eye. I've got to nail the eyeball because I only have that. And that happens on our Tuesday shoots that we do that we should have been doing yesterday, God damn it. And we weren't. But I mean, that happens all the time because almost all of us shoot pretty much wide open on the Tuesday shoot because we can get the field we want. But I'm using that focus button a lot more there than I do, say, on burn night.
Yeah. I mean, as much as you can take, and there's a lot of really smart things in cameras these days, and they do a lot of clever things, and they let you do filters and they let you do all this sorts of stuff. They're not always really good at picking the right aperture or the aperture that you want, or they're not always good enough about picking the focus spot. So the more of that stuff, that's why all of us are basically shooting in manual for exposure, and we're doing back button focus so that we're taking those decisions away from the camera manufacturer and putting them in the hands of the artist, so we know exactly where we're putting that dot. Because if I've got 3 fire performers, but I want the 2 in the front and the 1 in the back, I can limit, and this is even center point focusing, even with regular focusing, do that as a start. It'll let you put the focus exactly where you want it rather than let the camera decide, because they're really bad at it. Manual's not that scary.
So another question that comes up a lot is, how do you pose, or do you pose your fire performers? Because you don't want to get the flame in their face. You don't want to get whatever. And I'll start with that one. If I have like a Tuesday shoot, the 2 hardest things with fire performers is most fire performers are used to performing where the audience, they're in pitch black, the audience is watching the flame. So they're focused on their technique, not their face. And so a lot of times we get what we call flow face, where they're like doing some weird kind of thing in their face because they're not thinking about somebody's watching their face. So just reminding them before a shoot that's important will change the whole shoot. Just say, remember I'm going to be shooting your face. You need to have the expression you want on there, etc. It will change that whole photo shoot. And then the second one is if you're doing long exposure, and we haven't even talked about long exposure stuff, then telling them, make sure that the shot that I get, the flame never passes in front of your face. So those are the two tips I have for posing folks. Other than that, I just want them to do their shit. So Grant, what are you?
Yeah, for me, and this goes beyond fire. I mean, a lot of fire performers don't get really good images from really good photographers. There are a lot of people out there just taking images. And it's the same for portraits. There are a lot of people who have really, really portraits of themselves. It's getting them comfortable. Like in the Tuesday night, we've got like 2 seconds to do it. But for me, it's letting them get a little bit into flow and a little bit more comfortable with what's going on, a little bit more comfortable with the camera and me moving around. And then I can start talking to them. We start to build like a 5-minute rapport about what they're doing. I need them to be comfortable because then they won't be tense. Tense are, you know, having a fire performer do this, it's the same as when you photograph somebody who's walking in studio. You don't have someone with 1 foot, you can't see my feet, sorry, with 1 foot in front of the other. You actually have them take a step. And why do you have them take a step? Because it's a more natural movement. It gives you a more natural image. The image will be better. So that's why most of my fire photography is the performer moving.
Hank?
Same thing. I just try to quickly establish a kind of rapport that's put them at ease and say, hey, we're here having fun and that's a good time. And this is a fun night, isn't it? You know, kind of thing. And,
yeah, nobody's ever died doing this.
Right. Just, you know, try to, you know, get them, if they are, many people are already just happy and happy to be there and all that. And, but I can totally understand if, you know, anybody, performer, no matter how long they've been doing it, could be, you know, nervous or something. So I just do the same thing. Yeah. Just try to say, try to face me as much as possible and, you know, and do your thing.
Yeah. And I think it also depends on the performer, because a brand new fire performer is going to be more nervous than you get somebody, you know, like, you know, Wrangler here, who's on the thing with us. She's been performing forever. I don't have to tell her anything. She knows how to perform in front of a camera, in front of a crowd. Those people, you're just establishing more of a, hey, how's it going? Let's have fun, versus somebody that's picked up wicks for the first time. Yeah, I'm going to have to tell them more because they're already nervous about just holding the damn fire, much less now I'm sitting in front of them with a big ass camera lens. So,
and keep talking to them. So
yeah,
it's the same as studio stuff. It's the same as shooting models. It's the same as portraiture. Keep talking to them. The more you keep talking to them, the more you relax them. But as a photographer, like on the Tuesday nights, I'm moving as well because I'm trying to get them in a nice composition with the man in the background, and they're doing this. Yeah. So I have to kind of move around. So I will tell them, it's okay. It's not you. I'm trying to get you in front of the man. You keep doing you.
Yeah.
Leave it up to me to worry about the image. You do you, boo. Just keep performing. I will move around you. I'll get you. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, I do the same thing where I kind of narrate what I'm doing, kind of put these and say, I'm going to do this thing. I'm going to try to put the man over there, and I'm going to put the man over your shoulder, and this is really great, and oh, that was really fantastic, and it kind of helps me too. It reminds me to calm down.
Yeah, and then sometimes you see something different. The Infinite Spin girls have a heart-shaped hoop, which is beautiful, and one of them balanced it on a nose, and it was okay. Can we just like come back and do that, because I want to frame the man inside the heart.
Yeah, that was so
and
good.
It's an epic photo. So think about those types of things as you're doing them. Like, okay, good, that was great. Can we just do it a little bit different next time?
Right.
And the other thing is as Grant said before, there's a lot of maybe not great fire photographers out there. So if you start shooting somebody and you get one, because you're every now and then chipping your camera, if you just say, "Oh my God, we just got an epic one," the people will stop and slow down, and all of a sudden they become comfortable because they like, "Oh, this guy or gal knows what they're doing." Awesome. I can watch people. Once I say that, I'll just chip like, "Okay, we got the best one of the night. Let's keep going." People will relax because now it's over for them. Now they're just having fun. So it literally, if you just give them confidence that this is going to work, it changes their attitude.
Right.
Yeah. And that goes beyond when you're making the images too. It's important to deliver. And even if you can't get it all edited, deliver what you can as quickly as you can. That builds so much rapport with the performers for the next time. You know, I know that one of the reasons that I'm standing here on this Zoom is because I delivered for a person with a wheel sitting behind them. You become reliable. You become someone they can go to. And then they will trust you more. They will trust you with, "Oh, I want to do this thing on the beach," or "I want to do this other thing," or "I'm playing with a new tool. Do you mind coming out and taking photos?" Yeah, sure. Why not? Let's go do.
So here's a fun question I'm going to ask because I think it's funny. What is the worst thing that has ever happened to you at a fire shoot? I got hit in the head with a rope dart.
That's funny.
Pretty cool.
Oh, that's awesome.
I was literally like this. I said, "Throw it next to my head." Bang. And I was looking through the camera lens and I got an epic shot out of it. But literally I was soaked in fuel. And luckily it didn't light. But the safety dude was climbing on me, trying to put me out even though I wasn't on fire.
That's awesome.
Be glad it's not a whip.
Yeah. I mean,
that would have been fun actually if it was a whip. So
there are
I've seen gashes.
There are performers I will trust with that stuff, and then if I don't know you, no, you're going to stand over there, and I'm going to stand over here. But a lot of the LA spinners, yeah, shoot your poi past my head, shoot a media past my head. I'm totally cool. I've seen you put it exactly where you want to put it before. In terms of the nothing really bad has happened. I mean, I had to walk around one burn night with a torn calf muscle, but that was roller derby and that wasn't burn night. Was my first burn working for Burn Academy, and two of the dragons in the group during Renegade just thought it would be funny to break in the new guy and just start breathing over my head. Now that was fine. I was cool. I was just but then as we got out of it, I was drenched in oil. I was covered in lamp oil.
How did I not hear this? We're gonna talk after. I want to know that.
You kind of have to remain calm no matter what. You know, I've definitely had droplets of whatever falling on me, and you just have to and just remain focused on the thing. Which brings up a good point. I usually have a yellow microfiber in my pocket, and I will try to remember to keep on looking at the front of my lens just in case there's a drop on there or it gets dusty. Because especially some nights, if there's any kind of a lot of dust, that'll get on your lens. And so, especially if I've been showered a little bit by, some lamp oil.
Yeah, and if you're ever around Justin and Ian, watch out because you literally become coated in cornstarch.
Yeah.
These guys are fire breathers that breathe cornstarch. First time I did it was up in Lake Tahoe at an event called Snow Globe, and I was standing below the stage. And
I just did Snow Globe for them this year.
Yeah, I walked out of there not realizing that I was white. I was literally white.
Yeah. Same thing happened to me.
Yeah, not all that stuff burns.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and
I will say that fuel on your lens can create some really cool pictures. I've got stuff that looks like bokeh is behind the performer because fuel droplets hit my lens and then blurred out. So it was really cool, but it wasn't intentional, but still an epic picture. I put it on the wall last year or 2 years ago. So
and kind of to that point, a little bit is it gets back to knowing your performers and knowing what they're doing. Like breathers can use different materials. Cornstarch is so much dimmer than regular fuel, and you have to adjust, and you have to adjust, and it'll happen on you all of a sudden. A lot of performers are using bright sparkling metals these days in their fuel mix on their tools. Figure out what you want to do with that. That's going to overexpose a lot of stuff, but it's also a really bright second source. So now you've got a really good source to light up the performer, and you'll get really good frames from that.
No, I agree. I mean, and I learned the whole thing about cornstarch versus fuel when two of them were breathing together.
Mm-hmm.
And they used to, if you know Ian, they throw things into the flame and make it colored. And the flame didn't come out colored, my exposure. And I asked Ian, he goes, oh, that's because the fuel that the other guy was using was so much brighter, it blew out
blowing out everything.
Rainbow. So you really need to understand what fuel they're using. If you're shooting normal fire, let's say at the setting, normal fire breathing, like I said, the settings we talked about, which is, you know, ISO 400, shutter speed 800, 4.5, you may have to adjust that. You may have to make, if it's somebody that blows a big breath, you may have to up that shutter speed to, you know, 1,000th or even 1,600th of a second, because you want to capture that brightness and not blow it out, realizing that you're still underexposing that picture.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have to have a really high methanol content in order to let the color pull through. Otherwise, the ethanol will blow it out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you just get nothing. Or you have to spend a bunch of time in post trying to pull it back out.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's, you know, knowing your tools aren't just the camera. Your tools are all your post.
I think I've got a picture of Justin and Ian that Hank took. I'm going to spotlight it so you guys can see it.
Yeah.
It's one of the big fire breathing photos.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's infinite spin.
That's infinite spin that you're showing us there. Yeah. That was it. That was 3 years ago at the Tuesday shoot.
Right.
Yeah. And Cherie is breathing gas, lamp oil. The other two are breathing cornstarch.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Yeah, Cherie does lamp oil, and that's why hers is so much brighter than everything else, and it's just basically blown out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's an example of me trying to get them instead of the fire detail.
Right.
You can see the particulate from the cornstarch in the photo, though.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, below. Yeah, right in the middle.
Below the flame. Yeah.
Yeah.
As a fire photographer, you almost have to be careful, because I can capture that particulate on both fuel and cornstarch.
Yeah, you can see fire.
You'll find fire breathers that will start giving each other crap because they have too much spray outside of the flame.
Oh.
And so I've had people get arguments over my pictures because somebody sprayed too much and didn't get it enough.
Yeah, they're getting very high tech with it. But you can see the particulate coming from the fuel. The droplets are bigger, whereas the particulate coming down off the flame with the cornstarch, it's a lot finer. You can see the difference in the photo. That's a great photo.
It is. It's an awesome photo.
I wish I were standing back a little bit. I wish it didn't crop off at the bottom. You know, this was, I'm sure, with the 7D. And so I was standing not far away from them at all. And I was trying to get the man in the shot. And I was just got lucky that I think I have other shots that are within, you know, a half second or less where it wasn't just quite right. So, but this was the one that was a little better.
Yeah.
And I just kind of got lucky with the exposure, but it was because I had been shooting them, for a while, and so my exposure was kind of dialed in at that moment. And especially with the fire breathers, they've been doing a little bit, so my exposure was dialed in, and you could see them when they're about to do something. The great thing about fire breathing is that you can watch them, and it's like, okay, they're putting it in their mouth, they're getting ready, and they'll like go 1, 2, 3, and you're ready, which makes it a lot easier.
So Hank just brought up an interesting point, though, that he wishes he was back farther. Back to the whole exposure, if you can get closer, you can get more reflective light off of the individual. So if I'm using like my 20 millimeter 1.8 lens, I can climb right up close to these folks.
Mm-hmm.
And I will get better, when I go into post, I'll get better pictures. I'll still get the flame the way I want it, but get better pictures off of the person themselves because there's more reflective light coming off them.
Mm-hmm.
The closer I get. So back to lens choice, if I can control the situation, like in the Tuesday shoot where this was, where I can get right up close to somebody, I will, with a wider lens, because I can get more detail out of the person. I'm going to get the flame the same either way, but I want to get more detail out of the person later.
Yeah, and it's not going to be perfect. It's rarely going to be perfect. But the important thing is to get better and start making better choices. And if you've got a brother or sister or your own kids running around in the backyard, that's really good practice for this, because you're having things move really, really quickly. Love your background, Scorch.
I can't get it. You're missing the hard part. I can't rotate.
Yeah, I know, but it's Nicole. But it's like learning from sports shooters. It's finding those auxiliary things. If we were back in normal times, go and shoot an event or a parade. There's stuff going on all the time that will keep you on your toes, and it's building that muscle. Just keep building the muscle.
Right. So one thing that I forgot that I want to mention is that I think all of us don't shoot with any filters like UV or anything on the lens itself, because that will produce internal reflections. Like, when I first started shooting fire, I would have a UV filter or something on my lens to protect the lens. And I would find these double images in all the pictures, and it mystified me for a little while. And then I realized, it's reflecting off of the lens onto the filter back into the lens. Yep. And so all of this is just naked lens stuff.
I'm going to throw another photo up. Sound good?
Okay. Sure. We're photographers. We like seeing photos.
All the ones I'm curious about.
Okay. All right. So this is, because I've got my Lightroom gallery just over here with actually all the settings and everything on it. This was at Burn Club in LA, and it happened to be raining. And unlike a lot of photographers, I don't run away from rain. It's not a perfect photo, but it was raining in LA, and rain in fire is awesome. So this is Tiana Powell. She's spun for some Conclave. She's a fire performer, dancer, all that sort of stuff. This is at my normal fire-ish settings, 1/32, 2.8, and 1600. And yeah, it's fire and rain. And I waited until there was enough fan in front of her and played with it so that there was still enough reflection off the water, and then she'd spun out on the ground, so you get the reflection on the ground as well. I don't know how it's coming across in the stream, but on my screen it looks really, really cool.
It's a great photo.
Looks great. Yeah, no, it came out great.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
All right, next photo.
Nice. All right. This one.
Okay, so this was shot last year.
Where'd you shoot that, Kevin?
I don't know. Weird, huh? And this is we haven't talked about long exposure photography with this, but so this is shot at about f/14 and ISO 100. So what I do with these is I do use an off-camera flash, In fact, off-camera strobe, it's this impact strobe with a grid on it, and I'll usually put a filter of some kind on there. And then, and a tripod. So I set up a tripod because I'm going to long exposure the man behind it. And then what I will do is have the performer perform, and instead of doing, I used to do it where I would set the camera for 1 second or 2 second exposure. I don't do that anymore. I use this or a remote trigger on my strobe. That strobe is on a separate light stand, and I will tell him, I will open the shutter as the flame's coming through and blow the strobe when I want to, knowing, and I'm talking to him the whole time, so that it may be a 1 second exposure, it may be a 1.5 second exposure. I don't have to pre-plan that, and I can take the picture as the tool is coming into the flame, and then go all the way through. So that's how I took that one. I liked it.
Yeah.
You're fine with manual though. You're doing a manual exposure, manual amount.
Total manual exposure. Total. It's on bulb mode. My camera's on a remote trigger or an extension trigger, and my flash is on an extension trigger.
So you flash the same amount every time.
Yeah, you need as much flash as you can get for these, because the more flash you can put on there, that's why I don't use a little strobe. I use the big one at full power, because otherwise, if you go less, you're going to get movement in your subject. So the more light you can throw on them at the end of the strobe, then the more they're going to freeze.
Huh.
And even if you don't have strobes, you can start to get longer exposures. Again, it's practice. Go out and do some night photography in the streets and just photograph cars and get used to holding your body really, really still. Because you can push it to 1/4 second, you can push it beyond 1/4 second if you practice. You can't quite get this because this is much longer. But you can certainly get some longer exposure stuff, even without strobes.
And this is Veronica Stein, by the way. She is also a photographer as well, and we did a body painting thing for her before this entity. So this was a whole day project at Burning Man last year. It was a lot of fun.
Got a couple more for you.
Sure.
So this is one of mine. I like a lot of pictures. I will import it, and then a lot of fire pictures, I will reduce the brightness, the highlights. I'll bring the highlights down to as a lot, and then I'll bring up the shadows. So originally this picture would have looked the shadows would have been much darker, like you wouldn't have been able to see the back of her hair at all, and the background is totally black, and the fire and her cheek were much whiter. So by bringing down the highlights and bringing up the shadows, basically. I forgot what ISO this was, but it was a little grainy, and so after I got her in the kind of exposure, and I think I painted in, used a little brush to do a little burning and dodging on her face maybe, but then I used another brush to smooth out the denoise it all around her, so the background is really, really smooth. Really silky, and she's a little noisier, which is the original photo, but I wanted to make the background super as smooth as possible, so I cranked up the noise reduction and just brushed around in Lightroom surrounding her, and this is one of, like, on burst mode of 5 shots in a row, and 4 didn't work, and this one did.
Yeah, I think, like, last year we did the Conclave shoot, where we shot a lot of the folks from Conclave, some of which are on this meeting. But I think that night I shot 2,000 pictures. I ended up with maybe 125 that were good, because you end up with 15 pictures of one pose, because it's just bang, 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 bang. I mean, when you're shooting, it's 7 to 9 frames a second. You know, you're going to shoot 10, 12 pictures and only keep one. So
Yeah, last year for the Tuesday shoot, I was just over 3,000 pictures.
Yeah, I was about the same odd
Yeah.
number. And it's important to do those sorts of things because unlike a lot of other events, this will never happen again.
Right.
And so don't be afraid to overshoot. Your gear will take it. So this is one of mine. This is a black and white. This is a black and white that doesn't look bad in color. And this is also an example of timing. That all of that light is off his poi. There's no artificial light in this. This is Andy Huang, who does Camp Kinetic and runs Burn Club here in LA. So I got him. I waited until the poi was coming up. He was getting nice tail. He was going the other way and getting a nice tail at the background. All right, I'm just going to keep trying to get that and keep trying and keep trying and keep trying. And then for this one, he just managed to lock eyes. And I was like, okay, great.
Perfect.
Now I have it. Yeah, it doesn't look bad in color, but looks so much better in black and white.
I'm gonna cycle through some of the others.
Sure.
Keep
Why
going.
not?
This is fun.
There we
Unless
go.
people are bored out of their gourd, then we can stop.
Oh, it's infinite spin.
Wow, that's a
so
great bet.
This is the guys behind them lighting them from behind with the soda powder, soda, and so they were really. So the original photo is it's off center more. You know, I cropped it to make it more centered, and it looks a lot duller and less orange, less yellow. So, you know, first thing I did is I did the same thing as where I would, you know, reduce the highlights and brought up some shadows. And then I used the white balance to shift it all over towards a more, you know, flame-like yellow. And then I, you know, did some, you know, made the blacks a little darker and stuff like that. And then I did use a brush on the middle woman's face to make it brighter because her front was in shadow, you know, basically in shadow. And so I wanted her exposure on her face to be about even with the other two. So I did lighten that slightly. But it's the difference between the original raw is pretty significant. The original raw it's okay. But it's not, it's kind of dull and it feels really washed out. And so, you know, it's like when I go through and I look at these, you look at all these photos and you think, does that one have potential? Does that one have potential? And sometimes you sort of have to work on it a little bit and say, oh yeah, this one does. So I'll work on it some more.
Yeah. There's also, yeah, and kind of to what we were talking about earlier, posing subjects. Fan performers, there may be some in the audience right now, are notorious for looking great and then holding their fans behind their head.
Yeah.
And so they go straight into blackness. That's why you need to keep talking to them as well, of like, move it forward. That light is the light. That's the only light I have. It needs to be on your face.
Right.
They don't like it because now all of the fire and all of the fuel and all of the stuff is not in a terribly comfortable place. But yeah, you have to talk to them.
Huh.
So true.
But with those dragon wings, you can't do much.
Well, I mean,
The fire is so far away from her face anyway, it's not going to matter much.
even though this is a Tuesday night and you know it is an opportunity to give direction, they're still moving. You know, there's so much movement, and the guys behind are doing the stuff so quickly, and you can't talk to them. You know, in that moment.
Well, and flames are loud. I mean, when they're moving poi by their head, they can't hear you.
Yeah, that kind of works.
Right. We're all just winging it.
Well, go ahead.
This is Cam from LA. Let me move my thing across. So this is definitely an example of ride the fire on the tool, because this is 2.8 1600, but it's 1/1000th of a second, because Cam likes big fire. camera door's big fire, that's what he does. So I knew he was coming out with these big long wicks, and you can't see how really long the wicks are on the staff, but they're really long. So there's going to be a lot of fire. This was fresh, but that's great because it gives me a lot of light on his face. So that's where it's okay. I'm going to have to go up to 1,000, and it's the fastest thing I can do on my camera to change it. And then the original from looking at the Lightroom, the original from the finished, I've corrected the color a little bit, added a little bit more brushing of exposure on his face and his body just to bring it out a little bit. I've touched up his tattoos and some of in his pants with a little bit of extra clarity as well, just to make them pop a little bit extra, and probably a little bit of extra clarity on the flames as well. But this is relatively close to as it looked at a camera.
Fantastic. Oh, wow.
There you go.
Okay. So this is,
I know her.
So this one, and it's a fun one to teach people. This is butane fuel in soap bubbles.
Mm-hmm.
And when we did this, she had never done this before. I basically showed her how to do it. We had safeties on two sides, but this is one where I did add light. So this is where I had that same light I just showed you was sitting right next to me. These flames last literally 3 seconds, maybe 2, but realize my camera shoots at 7 to 9 frames a second. So I had 14 shots to choose from and could pick it out. I did do a fair amount of editing, bringing her out, because even with the extra light, it needed to be, I needed to bring her out of the back. The original flame was more dark, and I wanted to get more of that eyeball out of her. But yeah, this was done actually about 3 weeks before Burning Man last year, when I was trying to come up with a picture to put on the wall, and we went up and shot at a castle that's outside of town by about an hour and a half. So it was a lot of fun, and I shoot those almost the same as my fire breathing settings. So you shoot them really fast because you want to get some texture out of the flame.
Yeah, but it's also a really good example of putting your focus point exactly where you want it. That focus is on her eye, and that's where you want the attention to. Your eye goes to where the focus is. Having her eye there, if her eye was even a little bit more blown out, a little bit more blurry, it wouldn't work as an image.
Right, and what you don't see here is, because Grant's absolutely right. Before she was ever lit, I refocused on her eye maybe 3 times. What you don't see is there are 2 people on a person on either side. One was lighting and one was a safety. So you can't tell in this picture, but there are 2 people standing right next to her. And as soon as they light that, they pull the light back, because this thing goes off so fast. But I've done this photo thing with my relatives because it's fairly safe to do. You can do it really quick, but make sure there's somebody standing next to you, because you are taking a picture. You cannot be the safety at the same time on almost any of these pictures, but on these specific, when you're going big flame close to someone's face, you want somebody standing right next to you.
Yeah.
All right, guys, I got one last one, and then we're going to wrap it up for the evening.
Sweet.
Okay. Oh, that's me again. So
The dragons.
yeah, so this is those same basic camera settings. We did a body paint shoot in North Carolina, where I went to teach how to photograph fire. And so we had 2 performers there. We spent the entire day shooting. And this is one of my favorites out of it, because they both happened to flame at the same time. It's one of the hardest things to do, is to get 2 people to get fireballs next to each other, because just coordinating them breathing is difficult. The other thing I'll point out about fire breathers that I like, most fire breathers keep their wick next to them through the whole breath. And something I always talk to them about ahead of time is as soon as you light it, bring your hands down. So as soon as it starts, bring those hands down, because it's a better picture to have their hands down next to them, in my opinion, than keeping that flame up. So if I'm talking to a fire breather, that's one of the tricks I try and talk with them about. The other thing is if you can shoot them from the side, you don't get just that chin in the breath.
Yeah.
So if you can shoot a fire breather from the side, you're going to get a better face.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's the same for eaters as well.
Mm-hmm.
And that picture of the fire eater that was one of Hank's is a really good picture of a fire eater, because normally they've got their torch down near their chin and they're bent over backwards double, and so you've just got, you know, up the nose images all over the place. So
All right.
yeah, that one. It's beautiful.
Yeah, her name is Vila. She's part of the Brooklyn Proposition.
Yeah.
Cool.
She's really great. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody. This was amazing. Hank, Grant, Kevin, we really appreciate all your knowledge. Beautiful photos, and thanks for sharing today.
Yeah.
Absolutely
Thank you, guys.
beautiful photos.
Feel free to contact any of us if you have questions.
Yep.
We're happy to answer them.
Absolutely.
Yep, I'm Grant Palmer everywhere, so you can find me. Yeah, pretty much everywhere.
Pretty much everywhere.
Pretty much everywhere. It's a marketing thing, Scourge.
Hey, all I know is that if I just put a little, you know, phrase out there for you, a little plug-in, dude, Grant used to go above and beyond for me, and I appreciate that. I can't tell you how much. But he would literally go in and put me in black outfits, no matter what color I was wearing, because he knew me so well. And having that kind of rapport with a photographer is so important. It's like I just trust him explicitly, and I know he will get done when he needs to get done, you know. And having that kind of relationship with a photographer is just it's not replaceable. It's irreplaceable. It really is. It's phenomenal. So thank all of you. I mean, every year you guys go above and beyond for what you've done for the Fire Conclave, and you really up the bar on photos. And I, for one, appreciate every one of you. I can't tell you how much. So thank you.
Thank you.
This one's for you guys.
Awesome.
See, now here they could bring the exposure down a little bit and less blur.
Right.
Because they can probably rack the white suits because they're really reflective, so they'll come back up in Lightroom.
Right.
Yeah, they're shooting in raw video, sure.
Right. Sure.
Oh yeah.
All right, thanks everybody. We're killing the recording.
Well done, guys.
Thank you.
Good night for
Thank you,
now.
guys. Good to
Bye.
see you.
Everyone, send your cards and letters.
Thank you.